Hey folks, it's John from A's for Alcoholic again. Today's conversation is with Julia Kay. She is a comedian, actress, writer. She goes by Rehab Girlfriend online. You can find her on TikTok, on Instagram, and we got to talk about all the stuff that her comedy comes from. Relapse, recovery, rehab, relationships. There's a lot of R's in there. We talked about a lot of other stuff. Questioning your thinking and trying to figure out this thing inside of us that causes us to do the dumb things we don't want to do. It was an awesome conversation. It was really great to meet her and chat with her. Again, I highly suggest you go check her out online, Rehab Girlfriend. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Julia Kay. It's funny how I found you was on TikTok, of all places, which I find more people, you and there's another gentleman by the name of Sean Barry Parsons that I highly suggest. He does awesome comedy, and he is also sober, and he was on the podcast as well. So his TikTok is hilarious.
Okay, I'll have to follow him. Sean, SHAWN?
SEAN.
SCAN. Okay.
So yeah, and I remember what I liked about the TikToks you were doing at Rehab Girlfriend was not only obviously a lot of this comedy is very dark because we're dealing with dark subjects, but it was really funny and it was really poignant. And I've never been in a rehab facility. I should have, I think. I'm pretty sure I could have benefited from one instead of doing what I did, which I wouldn't suggest. But and I really love too that there was that one particular song, so that every time the song would come on, it kind of cued me up sonically to go like, oh, this is her thing.
That's really good. I'm glad that you say that actually because I got kind of insecure about how many videos that I was putting in the beginning, but that was kind of what I was going for.
Yeah, you
Was just
nailed it.
kind of associated. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, you totally nailed it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that background music and I think what you were saying about not going to a rehab facility, not everyone, a lot of people say that they haven't. I
Mm-hmm.
was realizing like how privileged I am kind of to have gone so many times because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the reason why like I was just talking to Ronnie Morales, which is another really good TikTok. He's another sober TikToker that I love. Talking about this the other day, like how every joke that I write runs through automatically the recovery filter because that's what I've been steeped in for so many years now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that I'm a lot of the jokes run through the rehab filter like by default because I've gone so many times. But I'm realizing that that's not everyone's experience. A lot of people had to do it on their own or with like 12-step programs, self-help programs, or just like deciding to kind of make a lifestyle change on their own. So it's been really interesting
Yeah.
to hear about other people's experiences
Yeah.
too.
So it doesn't, I guess, too, the stuff that you do and the comedy that you put out and the stuff that you write is not it's not unrelatable for someone who's never been to rehab. Because I know, even though I've never been there, I understand. I've heard the stories enough. I've talked to people. There's still a lot, like, it's hugely relatable in that respect,
Oh,
you
good,
know?
good. I'm
Yeah.
glad.
But Julia, thank you for doing this. And my favorite question, my favorite question that I like to ask people first off is, what's your earliest memory with alcohol or substance abuse, whether it be with yourself or as a family member, or, how did you come across it? Was it something you grew up with or something that came in later in life?
My earliest memory was when I first learned what drug addiction
Mm-hmm.
um, was from my grandmother. I was like maybe 6, years old, and I had my first mocha. I went to like Pete's and got my first like mocha caffeinated beverage um, that morning, and I couldn't sleep that night. And so she was telling me stories to help me sleep. Because I was staying over at her house, and she told me about this neighbor of ours who had struggled with addiction and kind of tried to explain to me what that was like. But it scared me. You know, I was too young to kind of understand really what it was. And so I was really terrified. And then I guess that stuck with me. And a couple weeks later, I was at my mom's house and I was crying and I was like, Mom, I think I'm on drugs. But I didn't know. Of course, I just had no concept of kind of what it was. But then, so I thought that I was never going to do any drugs or touch alcohol. Like that's what I told myself growing up. That was like my
Mm-hmm.
idealized thing. Not that I had any reason to. Like, no, I didn't grow up with like, um, necessarily like, if I grew up with alcoholism, which I did kind of, I didn't really notice it
Mm-hmm.
because the people in my family that were alcoholics, I wasn't that close to, or they were like functional. So, yeah, when I was 13, I had my first experience with weed. Um, I just decided that it was something that I wanted to do. And so I asked the cool stoner girl that I knew in my class to if she would smoke me out with this other cool stoner girl, and they did. And it was not a good experience for me. I got really paranoid and about getting caught, and that I was very socially anxious, that I was embarrassing myself in front of these very cool other preteens. And yeah, so but I still did it. I still sought it out because I thought it was cool.
Huh. And so were you after that experience, did you this obviously wasn't the thing that you expected it to be. It was pretty awful. Did it how long before you found yourself back into or interested in drugs or alcohol?
Um, it was pretty instantaneous. Like even though I didn't so I know that it's in my blood. I have a lot of relatives
Yeah.
that have battled with addiction also, have lost a couple. Um and so I think, but it took me a while to find like my poison, you know. So when I found alcohol, that was kind of more, I liked it. I liked what it did for me. You know, it was more of
Hmm.
an escape. Um, it gave me more of, I think, what I was looking for. And I had that instant relief, that instant, why doesn't everyone do this all the time type of feeling. Like that was the escape that I had been looking for through so many avenues before that, like self-harm, um, boys, distractions, you know.
And was self-harm something you were doing as well early on?
Yeah, I'd say that that was the first, like, that was my gateway to
Really?
addiction, I think. And it behaved in a lot of the same ways, like the lying, the feeling special because I had a secret. This is something I'm doing to myself that no one knows about, kind of like a externalization of the inside, like pain that I didn't know how to deal with. Um,
Hmm.
and then like trying to stop, not being able to stop doing it even though I didn't want to do it anymore. um Having to like come out and tell my parents about it when I was like 13, 14, around the time that like my um like substance addiction started kind of taking off, around the same time. I think they're related in a way. um
You replaced one for the other, or they kind of they were happening at the same time?
it was anything I could get my
Yeah.
hands on really to make myself feel different.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I kind of swapped. I would swap things out, you know,
Sure.
whatever
Hmm.
works best.
Whatever works best, whatever's available, right? Whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So this is happening. That's what 13 or 14 is junior high or high school,
Yeah,
and you find
end of junior
alcohol
high,
and
beginning
everything's
of high
great.
Yeah, everything's great. It's not because I have the instant consequences, instant like, oh my gosh, that was humiliating. I like said and did all these things that at the time I felt really free enough to do, but then looking back, I don't like that. Oh, that means I need to drink more the next time that I hang out with those friends that, and then, oh, well, I don't like vacuuming the house when my parents aren't home. Let me just go kind of explore the liquor cabinet, take a couple of shots of Smirnoff, and then I'll have much more fun vacuuming the house.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it kind of um, got, it was never in my control, I don't think. I think I
Yeah.
was pretty much hooked on it from the time that I tried it.
I definitely would. There's been many times in my life, in my drinking life, that doing housework was always like, oh, we'll loosen up, we'll have some fun. We got all this, and it was usually because of some great amount of destruction that I had caused within the house, just, days after days of drinking and smoking and not cleaning up after myself. And then thinking, oh, well, I just need to catch a little buzz and we'll get this all tidied up and everything will be great. And almost never did that happen. Not
Right.
completely, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you're drinking and you're vacuuming and this is like high school days, and you're saying that you're finding immediate consequences through shame and guilt. um was it soon thereafter that rehab, I mean, how long before rehab came to the picture? How long before there was a severe enough problem for you to, or was it you who said I need to go to rehab?
Um,
How did that come
that's a good
about?
question. I find myself talking about my early experiences with it a
Hmm.
lot when I kind of launch into my story, and I wonder why that is sometimes. I think it's because um I just got so into the cycle of addiction, of like you said, the shame and the guilt. Oh, then I drink more to try and fix that, then more problems, then trying to drink more to fix them, and then, or use more, finding different drugs, ways and means to get more, the whole hamster wheel cycle that I forgot like the core reasons of what led me there and what it was like when it was still working. And then as time went on, as I got older, it just was, I guess to answer your question, at the end of high school is kind of when I think it started to show. I was
Hmm.
never very good at being functional with it. And at the end of high school, I had found a way to get my hands on a Xanax prescription, which would quickly become my most destructive drug of choice. And I took way too much of it before prom. And my parents were really terrified. They were like, what? They couldn't smell anything, but they knew that I was out of it. So that kind of alerted them to that was a problem. And luckily, I had two people in my immediate family who had experience with 12-step programs. One of them offered to take me to my first meeting, and I went. I thought that it had nothing to do with me. I just did not know what I was doing there, but I did it to get the heat off.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I moved in with my grandparents and went to college, and that um, budding, budding young addict given a whole bunch of new freedom and a whole new chance, right, to start over. Like I had
Hmm.
so much at stake from, oh, I thought that I wrecked high school, I thought that I blew it, I lost all my friends, I embarrassed myself, but now I'm going to college, I have all this freedom, it's new and shiny and full of potential, and I better not blow it. And then once I inevitably did, because I was still drinking and using and doing the same things, um, then I just went fully off the deep end, and my family like intervened, had like a little intervention and made me go to rehab for the first time.
What was that like? Like an intervention? I mean, what was that like?
It was really loving. It was one of the most loving things that anyone's ever done for me. And so it touched me. I didn't understand though still what addiction was, or how it applied to me or what it was going to mean for me. It still didn't connect with, okay, if I'm an addict and I need help, I'm going to have to actually change what I'm doing, eh, genuinely. But
Hmm.
it was good. I've been lucky enough to have a lot of family members that have been willing to support me and stand by me and keep me accountable. Um, so yeah, that was kind of the first introduction. And then um, that was like in the middle of my first year of college when I was 19. And then just, I didn't stop, obviously. Things continued to happen. And I eventually hit another bottom and went to residential for the first time, an all women's residential in San Mateo. After I was, out there running away from home, using, and I was sexually assaulted. Um, and that was kind of a wake up call, you know, and I kind of gave up at that point. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I called my mom and I was like, I needed help, and she helped me. And then I think I was at that point ready to accept help, but I wasn't ready to stop using. But going to rehab was a great experience because it helped me heal a little bit and learn about the disease. Yeah.
So you were able to go to rehab. You were able to see that maybe there was a problem and that there was potential to change and feel better and to grow out of those things, but you still weren't ready to stop using or drinking this
Yeah.
first time. Yeah.
I thought I could still control it. I
Hmm.
thought that I Yeah, I thought that I could still control it. The first time that I went to residential, I would go 4 more times after that. Each time I'd learn a little bit more, and like it just took so long to get through to me because I thought I was special or an exception, or that I could make exceptions for different things. So I
Hmm.
kind of phased things out one by one. Xanax, um, that was easy because it brought so many consequences that ultimately I just couldn't pretend anymore that it was still working. So I gave up on that. But then alcohol, admitting that I was powerless over alcohol and that I really couldn't drink again if I wanted to lead the kind of life that I ultimately kind of wanted to, um, that I would have to give that up. That took longer, much longer. But luckily now I'm there. So that,
Okay. And so what does that look like in the midst of you say, you went to rehab 4 times, four times or however many, several times?
several times. Yeah.
Several times. What does control look like in those moments where you say you're released from rehab? I've learned a little bit. I feel better. I feel like, and so what does control look like with alcohol when you thought that you could? What was it? Certain hours? Was it certain times? What in your mind at that point felt like control, or what did it look like?
That's a really good question because now that I think about it, there was none. There wasn't even the illusion of it anymore. But like, that's the insanity that they talk about,
Mhm.
in 12-step programs, I think is where that originated. But that insanity of, or even I think Albert Einstein defined it as trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And that's really where I was at. Like, there was no proof that I had any control. I No one around me had any illusions about it,
Mhm.
but I
Mhm.
still somehow thought that I could make it work, and I just could not. If I
Yeah.
took a drink, I knew I was going to be drinking nonstop after that because there was no reason for me to stop. I couldn't, and I knew that's why I went to rehab so many times, because I felt like I couldn't do it without being physically separated from it for a period of time.
And having to have the external restrictions to, yeah, because you can't control yourself, right?
Right. Well, And I
No.
don't know if it would have been different if I really tried to do it on my own, you know? But
Mhm.
that's what I needed, and that's what keeps me sober today. A big part of what keeps me sober today is that I know that if I was to take a drink, um, like let's say if I was to go out after talking to you now and take a drink, I know that it would be very, very hard for me to stop. I would wake up the next morning and want to have another drink naturally because I did it yesterday. Why not today?
Mhm.
And then I would likely need to go to rehab or detox again to get that clarity back to realize, oh no, I cannot do this.
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, I
So
do.
yeah.
I would think I would do things where I would take a week off, or I could even do 2 weeks, and I think there was a couple of times in the many, many years where I took a whole month off, and I was like, "Well, there you go. There you have it. Problem solved." And then just go and like count the days down. That's another thing with people who do the dry January. I'm always hoping that maybe there will bring some epiphany to people, and that it won't feel like such a prison, because that's sometimes the impression I get from people who say they're doing dry January, and then halfway
Mhm.
through the month they're like, February 1st, man, we're going to get loaded, we're going to get drunk. But that's exactly what I was like, because I would black out the first chance I got, and there
Yeah.
was no real control, and I hated it. I hated every day that I was sober.
Yeah.
So and you talk about healing and understanding, and the education that you got in the rehab, in the treatment centers. What was it in the final one that, after all of the hamster wheel in and out and insanity, that what was the thought or the realization that said, oh, this time is going to be different?
That's a good question. Another good question. It's really making me think because um um it was definitely a combination of things. But I think I was tired. It was, and I don't want to say that it was all like within me, this sudden realization that I had just based purely on my own thoughts about my own experiences, because I did have a lot of constant external reminders and support, of like, um, just people that had my best interest at heart and would remind me, I don't think I think that sobriety would be good for you, and I don't think that you can handle drugs and alcohol. And then but for me it was like, god man, this is a really, really, really good question. Oh, it because I felt, I knew that I was gonna die. I forget. My brain wants, like, I forget
Hmm.
because you know, um, I don't know why it's so hard to remember. I don't know if that's part of the disease, but it feels like it probably might be. I knew that I was gonna die if I continued. Um, it was kind of a spiritual experience that I had. I've had a number over the years, but this time with this particular experience, I felt like death was close. And I got a sense that if I continued to keep doing what I knew I wasn't supposed to do, um, like, how, I don't know, there was a time when I was picking up and it was like, I might die. I don't know what's in this pill that I bought off the street. I am not living with anyone. I'm by myself. I'm mixing things. I'm not keeping track of how much I'm mixing. I'm getting into dangerous situations. I might die if I take this. And then I would take it anyways. Um, and so it felt like I was living on borrowed chances because I'd had a million of those chances and I'd gambled on like every single one of them. And um and so this time I got a sense from a higher power or whatever it may be, that if I continue to do that, I wasn't going to have much more left. And that reminder is now always in the back of my head. And so I decided that I had to do something else. Even if it wasn't going to be as like fun or whatever I could have possibly been squeezing out of that pipe dream this whole time,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't try that anymore. I had to try something else.
Yeah. And how long was that rehab, that last one?
This last one was at Diamond House in Sacramento, and it was about 70 days, 10 days of
Okay.
detox and 60 of residential.
So that seems like a fair amount of time. That's a substantial amount of time to spend in rehab, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I extended after the detox. I extended after um, the first 30 days. You know, you go first 30 days, and then if you want to do an additional 30, you have to request it and get approved through insurance and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's not the longest stay that I've had in rehab. The longest stay that I had was 90 days. Um, and the shortest that I've had is 45. But yeah, I've known people that have done more or less time than that. But yeah, it was a long time. I'm grateful I had enough time because it takes me a while to get that reasonable thinking back.
It takes what it takes, doesn't it? What is it? What did you find in rehab that you don't think you could have found on your own or elsewhere? What are the things? What were the really important things that you were like, "Wow, I'm so glad I had this," or "I can't believe this wasn't here before," or "How come I didn't see this?" What were the things that really helped support you in your time there? Especially, I mean, in the last one, the one that stuck.
um, I think it's another great question. Um,
Like, were there people or programs or processes that?
yeah, there it was all of that. The connecting with people, you know, waking up with them, going through the day, um, being reminded that we're all kind of dealing with the same thing. And if these other people are doing it with what they're going through, then I can give it a chance and see if I can do it too,
Mhm.
with what I'm going through. That was really important. I remember the first day that I got in to rehab, sitting down at a meal with other people when I had been isolating, using in my room for what felt like an eternity. um, I was so relieved. I was like, "Oh, hi guys." I didn't know if I was gonna be able to make it back here, you know. So
Uh-huh.
the connections, and learning also about my thinking patterns, the CBT element of it, cognitive behavioral therapy element of finally being able to get in the habit of questioning my thoughts and
Mhm.
planning my actions was invaluable. That really, really,
Questioning your thoughts and planning your actions. That's good.
yeah.
That's good advice. I haven't heard that one before.
It's probably it's like because I'm trying to give an example of like how it worked, because sometimes I would get thoughts that felt very real, well, thoughts that I believed, right?
Mhm.
um that felt like they must be real, and then emotions that felt like very real also, like, oh, a big thing for me is social anxiety. I'm worried what people think of me. I really need them to like me. And that gets very tiring. And that's ends up, you know, eventually where I feel like I need to drink to make it go away. And so what's been useful is learning how to notice what's coming up for me. Oh, I'm afraid my friend uh, Natasha is mad at me. Um, and then I get to question, like, oh, well, do I have any evidence for that? Did she say that? No. Okay. Then maybe suspend and give that the benefit of the doubt, or maybe ask her, learning to be more transparent and honest. And like, I don't know, just
No,
putting less pressure on myself to have control over what people think of me and everything that's going on in the room.
yeah, we call it a sometimes we call it a shit fuck stack, because especially with thoughts, because one thought will come and then I'll stack something else and then I'll stack something else, or it could be every single problem that I have in the world, right? Imagined, small, large, real. And so, but those thoughts will just compound and they'll build on top of each other until it's completely overwhelmed. I'm
Right.
completely overwhelmed. Everybody hates me. I can't do anything right. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, oh my God, where did all this start? And you're like, okay, well, maybe let's question that first one where you were like, yeah, oh, well, stupid stuff. Like for me, a lot of times I can't get to sleep. Like I
Mm,
put my phone on the other side of the room. I turn all the lights off. I give myself time and I'm like, well, great. Now I can't sleep. And now, has it been 30 minutes? It could have been 90 minutes. Great. Now I can't sleep. It's been 90 minutes. So it must be 1 o'clock in the morning. My next day is already ruined. I already start thinking about how much is ruined
yeah.
for tomorrow. And I haven't
Mhm.
even fallen asleep. And
Right.
so I go, okay. I just kind of breathe easy and say, John, this is just your meditation time. You didn't meditate at all today. So you're going to lay here and you're just going to let the thoughts flow. You're going to, all those silly little exercises that you don't seem to want to listen to, you do them now and you just let it go. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, just questioning the thoughts and what was the other part? Planning your actions.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like that's, being more intentional with how you behave and what you do and how you spend your time, right?
Yes. You just
Yeah.
explained it so beautifully. That's
Okay.
You did it. Like that. That's the thank you, because
Well,
that's exactly, yes. I'm exactly the same way. This shit fucks.
and that's from a there's a comedian slash musician that I really love. His name's Reggie Watts, and he does a lot of comedy. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Um, like back in the 90s, he was in this like soul and funk band in Seattle, which is where I first heard of him. And then to come to find out he does comedy, which is he's just a very bizarre, strange, fascinating dude. And he's done TED Talks and he's written albums. And so, but he has a song, I think it's called Shit Fuck Stack. And so that's where the idea came from. And I was like, that's exactly what I do in my own alcoholic brain, you know?
Yeah, I love that.
Um, but so rehab, you're finally here. You've decided this is the one that's going to stick. How long has it been? How long do you have sober today?
That is another good question. It's so
Or how do you define it?
that's that's a question that I've been asking myself lately. So basically, just to be really, really honest and get down to
Mm-hmm.
to what I've been trying to figure out lately. So I entered into rehab this most recent time on February 4th of last year, 2020. So it will be in like 3 days. Technically, it's been a year since I've picked up any Xanax or meth or alcohol or weed or any like of the mind altering substances, opiates, any of those ones. But I'm also a pillhead. So I've abused many things like over the counter sleep aids. Doesn't really give you a high, just makes you super
Mm,
uncomfortable. Why am I doing that? Or like
yes.
overtaking my like blood pressure medication. What will an extra propranolol do to me? Will it make me less anxious? No? Okay, well, I'm going to try it 10 more times and see if maybe one of those I get lucky and hit the jackpot. And so there's been that. There was also, I have been going through trying to figure out if my relationship with the medication I take for ADHD, one of the medications, Adderall, extended release Adderall, which I used to identify as one of my drugs of choice. I've abused the hell out of that in the past. I've
Mm-hmm.
also used it for a long time and it's helped me like as a medication, you know what I mean? And so um lately I've been trying to figure out um whether that's going to affect my date. I did reset my date like publicly on TikTok a few months ago when I was taking more Adderall than prescribed and was um, uh, one time I like mixed like other prescription medications that I had that weren't like a controlled substance. That was a dangerous mixture on accident because I couldn't sleep. Taking Benadryl because I want like some extra crazy dreams, you know, just different things that I was doing around the time that like um you know, my sponsor was like, you probably really need to reset your date, I think.
Right.
um, and so I've gone back and forth on like, well, how do I celebrate, you know, not picking up all the things that I used to pick up? Um, and how do I celebrate that and continue with my work on that? Um, and, or and I don't know, just kind of figuring out if my ideal of sobriety, which is not reaching ever for anything outside of myself to try and change how I feel on the inside, whether that's realistic or attainable. So it's just like I don't know, and I feel it's a very hard thing for me to talk about.
I
And I'm
uh,
ashamed to say that because I I tell everyone that they shouldn't be ashamed of wherever they're at, you know, and it's something that I preach to people online. And then, but then meanwhile, I'm not very open about like the questions that I'm struggling with. Um,
well, thank you for sharing here. I know, it's a little bit different in a longer conversation like this than trying to fit everything into a 60-second TikTok necessarily, but I appreciate you doing that. And I think it's important to say I feel shame because I'm not always, because when I know that, and it was said to me just the other day that pain shared is pain lessened, as
yeah.
in it's less than it's been lessened. And I was like, oh, because I was complaining about my hips or something like that in running, and this woman that I know, and she says I haven't been able to run, and I got COVID and my whole family got COVID and blah blah blah, and she was just going, and she, not blah blah blah, but she was going on about it, and we were talking back and forth, and she said thank you for sharing that. Or that's why, because she said I don't know why I'm telling you all this. And I said that's fine, because you can't run and you can't breathe and you're having trouble. And the point is that the thing that she said was pain shared is pain lessened. So I mean, yeah. And what's most important? Probably that you don't take Xanax, right? What's
Yeah.
most important for me is probably that I don't drink alcohol. But I went through a very deep, I went through a very heavy phase with ice cream. Do I have to reset my date with ice cream? I still am like, I am like these little sugar, demons, dragons, whatever that I have to contend with, that it, and you can't outrun a bad diet. And I know that, but it's always like, the donuts and candy and these things. And it's, so you're right. At what point do we just say I am free from any searching for anything external to make myself feel different? And I don't know, maybe that's just part of being human, right?
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking lately too. Um, I wonder.
Hmm. I
I,
don't know. I don't know. I mean, wanting to sleep can be a pretty desperate thing too, and I completely understand. I mean, I went through a phase of abusing over the counter sleeping meds, the Z-Quil or whatever, and then waking up and going, oh god, I feel hungover, like this isn't good. I haven't felt hungover in a year or 2 years or 3 years, and here I am not being able to start my day right. So it's complicated, man. And so, I mean, thank you for saying so, because I think it's important for people to hear that.
Yeah, thank you for making me feel I feel safe enough to share that here, and I feel like yeah, it's complicated. And that complicatedness used to scare me because I used to find comfort in the black and the white, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because but now the gray area is kind of like it's not as unsettling because it's like I know not to like not to like in a conversation about like nuance and complex definitions of sobriety whip out an old saying, but the whole progress not perfection thing, I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't have to have it all figured out, but I can figure out what works for me and what doesn't.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, it's corny, and these things, these sayings and the axioms and the, all the stuff that we hear constantly, progress not perfection. Well, or another one that I've heard was, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. It's like, oh, okay, so I did some good today. I don't have to be perfect. My diet wasn't perfect, but I didn't drink. And even then, after so long, I'm like, okay, John, well, you need to tackle that problem.
Yeah,
And but I'm also not going to be down on myself because of something that I ate, or if I'm struggling with sleep, well, then you have to try something to figure it out.
right,
And we're not all gonna be able to we're just not all going to be able to get there as easily as we want. And if that includes, you know, having to struggle with over the counter medication, then that's another thing. And you're like, oh, okay, so what is actually causing that? And like you said, and I was going to ask you too, and I don't know if this is something that's changed the way that you think, going through rehab and going through these programs and getting, what I have found are it was sort of like these tools for life. And this, my sponsor called it, he said, John, this is the missing life, the missing manual is what he called it. And he said, you can basically take this book and you can remove the word alcohol, and whatever's troubling you, just put that in there, and then just read the book again. Okay. And so I was like, oh, Jesus. Okay. But he's right. He was right. And so now when I have problems, I can kind of step outside myself a little bit and, look at it and go and be more critical in what I'm actually thinking, that I don't have to be swept up in every single thought and every single emotion. Right.
right.
And
Yeah.
I'd wonder, do you feel that way too, now that you're being more critical about your behaviors, even if you're not able to, stop them, or if you feel guilty or ashamed?
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things that I love about recovery in general and 12-step programs in particular, because it is kind of this universal blueprint of a solution, just I think for like overall self-improvement or anything that you really want to work on, because everyone has something like that. And I find myself as I'm trying to be a better person and work on myself and figure out how to live, figure out this manual that is missing. It's really useful um, to have it all laid out the way it is. Um, so yes, I am. It's becoming easier to be gentle on myself while still taking steps to get better and trying to be more honest or more whatever, you know insert quality here. Lately for me it's been like transparency. I've been trying to work on that better.
Sure. Well, you want to, I mean, I think that's a good thing to strive for, and not to say one thing, especially publicly, especially if there are people, strangers on the other side of whatever it is that you are putting out there, and wanting to be like, "Hey, I mean this sincerely, not just I'm doing this for likes and points," and you know, because it's
Yeah.
easy to get caught up in that too.
Ooh, yeah.
Um but yeah, I'm with you there. And so I have a couple other questions. One, and I know we touched on some of it, but like, and well, first, I think too, because of your, and I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, your experience with rehab multiple times, and so rehab and relapse and coming back, that you know how big a year is. Like that's huge coming up, even with the other things that you have been dealing
Right.
with.
Yeah, the little asterisks. Yeah.
That's fine, right? Like, okay, so this year has an asterisk. That's fine. That's a step in the right direction, but that's huge.
Thank you. Yeah. It is, and it feels huge. I honestly never really thought that I would get there, so I'm really
Hmm.
tremendously grateful no matter how, you know, um
Hmm.
I thought it was, of course I expected it to be like simpler and perfect and, nice and tidy, but
Hmm.
I'm learning that that's rarely if ever how it goes. Um
Right.
but yeah, it is big, and it's cool because it's like never felt more possible. I didn't know if I was ever going to get there. And now I see like people celebrating time all the time, and I'm like, "Oh, cool." Like I feel like I kind of get it more
Yeah.
now. I'm excited to see just how it turns out and what's coming next. I'm excited. It's nice. It feels like I'm,
Good. It should.
yeah, going where I want to go.
Hmm. So, what do
Or
you? What's that
I said,
versus?
or in that direction at least.
Yes, that's the direction of progress,
Yeah.
right? Um, what are you struggling with now, like today? Like, what are your big struggles in recovery, or one big struggle? We don't have to pick them all. We don't have to pick it all apart. But like, if there was one that you'd say, "Huh, I've made it almost a year, and this is still an issue for me."
Um in this moment I'm struggling with articulating myself succinctly.
Well,
But overall, to answer your question, what am I struggling with? Connecting emotionally, allowing myself to connect
yeah.
emotionally on a deeper level. I'm moving to a new place with a friend that I met through TikTok. Very excited to move. It's been something that I've wanted to do since I was young, live in a new place, and something that I kind of promised myself that I would do in sobriety. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's very exciting. But I was like, I had like reservations about moving in with this person as a roommate and as a friend. And I was like, what is it? What is it? I couldn't figure it out until I realized that wouldn't, um, they don't allow me to sidestep or deflect, like when a moment's getting serious or meaningful with humor or anything. Like if I make a little flippy joke to, like throw off the trail, they don't indulge that and they'll really let the moment land. Um, with like meaningful things or things that aren't like really happy surfacey. Um, and so I realized that that's why I was kind of feeling a little bit reserved, because I was like, oh, if I move in with this person, I know that I'm going to have to connect with some deep emotions and like sit with them.
Yeah.
Um, and not only that, but have this other person see how that is for me, like be seen in a way that I'm learning is not very comfortable for me. I thought that as an addict who kind of like my emotions can be volatile and I can kind of wear my pain. Like I'll create crises to, around where my pain is, and just very expressive and messy kind of is how I feel as an addict sometimes. I thought that that meant that I was emotionally available and in touch with what I was feeling. But I'm realizing that I'm a little bit more disconnected um, than I thought. Um, and that I think that even more surprisingly than that, I think I'm finally ready to connect a little bit more, even if that means not. feeling great all the time and feeling kind of exposed and clunky and awkward. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
does that answer your question? I hope.
Yes, it does. Absolutely 100%. Yes. And you didn't even deflect with the snarky joke once. So it's. Yeah. I mean, and I do the same thing. It's just, I think it's what we do with this addict brain. And what's another one that they say? Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. The old timers say, and you're like, oh God. And then you come to, and then you're in that moment, you're like, oh, of course. And then at one point, you're the one saying it to somebody else, and then you hear it come out of your mouth. You're like, God, I sound so ridiculous, but you'll see one day it's true. um,
Exactly.
and my last question is there any do you have any advice for anybody who might be dealing with things that you've dealt with in the past, or somebody who is saying there's no way I could be a year sober?
There definitely is a way, is what I would say.
Okay.
um, um, yeah, and I would say reach out for sure, because that's something, actually, not to give advice that I have trouble taking myself, but um, I get a lot of messages from people, or I see comments on my content and on other recovery creators' content, um, about um, reaching out. I felt so alone in this. Watching your videos really makes me want to get help. Or sometimes I'll even get messages where they're reaching out to me for help, talking about what they're going through. And the so I love that. That's like a just crazy to me. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like sometimes it's hard for me to believe that I can even be a part of helping to influence that. Um, but it's the bravery of the people that reach out and are like, I can't stop using. I don't know what to do. Um, it gets to me because I know like what it takes to be. I still struggle with being honest, about like the Adderall thing, the over the counter prescription meds thing, that I don't know where my sobriety date is thing, but I'm still not going back to whatever. Being honest about that is so hard for me, that when I see people doing it, I'm like, oh, that's what I need to be doing,
Hmm.
too. So, and like continuing to go to meetings if that's what your support system is, even if you are using, just staying close, still staying in the pack. Like, because I used to break off when I would go relapse. I'd pull away from everyone and everything, and feel like I didn't belong there anymore, that people didn't want to see me, that I didn't deserve to be close to recovery in any way. Um, but now I see the importance of like still reaching out and staying connected as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
true. It's absolutely true. And I was going to this Sunday morning meeting, and that was my weekly. That was like, I never miss it. If I go to other ones, that's fine, but that was my home group. That's where I went every Sunday morning. But I also worked nights, so I'd always be tired. In some meetings I would just feel so exhausted, and I didn't feel like I wasn't receptive to anything. And then I started to feel these resentments toward the meeting itself, and having to get up early and go to this thing. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to the fucking meeting anymore. And that I'm just not doing it. And I don't want to, and I don't have to. And I'm an adult. And so I just didn't for like 2 or 3 months. I didn't go to that meeting. And I think I went to other ones, and then I remember, I think I wanted to stay up late and play video games on Saturday night or something really important like that. And like 2 or 3 months later, I go back thinking, oh man, they're going to want to know, like, I'm going to have to fill out some sort of attendance card, or I'm going to be in trouble, and people were just like, oh, hey, John, how was your summer? And I was like, oh, and that was the first clue that, like, it wasn't about me at all. I was like, oh, these people don't give a shit that I haven't been here. They're
Right.
just happy to see me when I came back.
Yeah.
So I was like, that was a big relief. And in that moment, I was like, oh, okay. That's why I come to this meeting every single week, even when I'm tired. You know?
Exactly.
because
Yes.
it helps, not because I have to.
Yeah.
If I get to, right? That's another one of those shifts that for me is like, oh, I get to. This is good stuff.
Yeah. You
Um
said it again. Yeah, that's exactly.
tell
Um,
me about what Rehab Girlfriend is and where it came from and why she exists and who she
deep
is.
pain. Came from
Pain?
deep pain. Yes.
Yes.
Um, it came from it's something that I've tried many times. Relationships with people, other people that are in rehab, at the same time. So I kind of thought it would be funny, um, like that, attention grabbing like that. I thought it might be relatable a little bit. And also, it started. My dad was dropping me off at detox this latest time, and I had just gone through the rehab before this latest time. Part of what led to my relapse. I mean, I wouldn't do anything differently, but how it went down was I met someone, fell in love with them while I was there, invited them to move in with me the day that they got out. We moved in together. Um, my IUD failed. I got pregnant unexpectedly. Decided to go through with the pregnancy, lost the pregnancy, was devastated, angry at God. I was like, you know, fuck this noise, excuse my language. But really, I accepted, and I was sober until the day that I found out that I lost it. I was just really angry that that was the way that it went after I had accepted this unexpected thing and done my best. That broke my sobriety, relapsed. It was just all downhill from there. And then the relationship ended badly, and I was devastated. So anyway, fast forward to after I relapsed about being devastated. My dad's driving me to detox, and he said, I had complained earlier to him about, drunk in the car. When you told me I couldn't be an actress when I was younger, like, that's what really hurt my feelings. My poor dad trying to make amends to me. And I'm like, why are you apologizing for that? This is what really made me upset. And he was like, well, if you wanted to be an actress so bad, you should have just done it. You could have just done it anyway. Fuck what I said. And I was like, he has a point. Don't love that he said it to me, but he's got a point. So I kind of pushed those two things together of like, oh no, I've done it again. Trying the rehab relationship thing out didn't work. Sometimes it does, never did for me. Had some beautiful relationships, love it, don't regret it. Much love to all of my rehab boyfriends of old. Um, and the whole like actually trying to go for what I want to do in life and not holding back on that anymore because of
Mm-hmm.
this dumbass fear of failure that swirls around me at every turn.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, long story long.
Yeah, I mean it's hilarious for anybody who doesn't or is interested or um you know it, Rehab Girlfriend on TikTok. It's 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 well thought out, well written, well acted. I mean, it's just that
Thank
I mean, I mean these things they're heavy, but they're it's funny because it's real. I know that sounds corny, but I immediately was like, haha, yes, that's exactly right. And you don't have to, I mean, I'm going to be 44 and I have never been to rehab. I thought it was hilarious. So there's definitely something relatable there for anybody who's in recovery
thank
for
you so
sure.
much.
You know, I mean, so I think that what you are doing and the more and more I see of people doing recovery stuff and not just program based or you know what I mean, not just hey, we're going to get you fixed up, you this that and the other, and stuff that people can because people can relate to the failures. We can
Mhm.
all relate to failures. And so and I failed so many times and it's like, what are you afraid of, John? You know exactly what's going to happen,
Yeah,
so you might as well do it anyway, right?
right.
So I highly suggest anybody go check you out on TikTok, Instagram. which is where I reached out to you. But yeah.
And thank you so much for reaching out. This has been amazing.
Yeah. Thank you for doing it. And I guess I'm kind of glad that I caught you off guard so that it was a little more organic.
Yes, sorry, that was like already regretting what came out of my mouth and how it emerged. But
It
thank
was
you so much
awesome.
for having me on this podcast. It's so amazing
Hmm.
what you're doing, and your questions. My God, I've never thought so much in my life. Could you smell the gears turning? Ah,
Oh, well, that's
you were
awesome. Thank you so much, Julia. Have a great day. February 4th is right around the corner. I'm sure you got this dialed in. So
It is. It is.
very
Thank
cool.
you,
Very
John.
cool. Thanks again for listening. Our music, as always, is by Neglect. You can find more of his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com.
And you can find us on all social media platforms that matter: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.